To the Black girl who has been working really hard to not fall apart, I see you. Hey, it's Kaylin, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, and this is the Black Girl Scene podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Girl Scene podcast, where we talk all things feeling, being, and allowing ourselves to be seen, known, and loved. Now, as we round out the first month of the year, which gets a lot of bad press these days, people say January is the longest month of the year. I've heard a lot of people say that this week was quite the month for them. So hang in there. It's almost over. And we've been diving into focusing on resetting, getting centered in our intentions, building our goals for the year, and really moving away from, just what we want to do and produce, and moving into truly setting an intention for allowing ourselves to be seen. This week is all about a practice that I believe we kind of overlook when we think about visibility. And I think some of us are familiar with the term. It's kind of new to the pop culture landscape, but not new to the world. And that term is unraveling. And as Black women, we're so familiar with learning and being conditioned to be strong, to keep ourselves together, all of that, and how it ultimately ends up hurting us, right? Those themes, those expectations, they serve everyone but us. And so this episode is about how we can finally shift out of that mindset and open ourselves up to the relief and support that we truly need and deserve. So let's get into it. So what do we mean by unraveling? So I have kind of a working definition that I think of when I think of unraveling. What I'm referring to is letting go, right? Really opening up, not trying to hold it together anymore, really processing whatever it is you're feeling, making space for it. But my working definition that I think brings some color to it is unraveling is a full-bodied release. It's letting go, and it's like a sacred coming undone that unburdens us, it frees us, and it makes space for our needs to be met, right? And it really resonates with me to call this action sacred, because we have generations of trauma in our bodies, in our spirits, connected to the story that we cannot do this, that we're not supposed to do this, we're not allowed to do this, we're not designed to do this. And so doing it is sacred and is inherently healing to the lineage, to the community. There's fortunately been a lot of research around a very specific term for this in the science, mental health, healthcare world, which is a strong Black woman schema introduced to us by Dr. Cheryl Woods Gascombe, and several phenomenal researchers after her really built up this work. And it talks about these very specific metrics of how we take on the burdens around us. We deny ourselves rest. We feel pressure to look like not only that we can do it all, but that we can do it all without struggle, that we cannot ask for help. And it just keeps us stuck in a cycle of toxic suppression, right? Work through the pain, dismiss and ignore the pain, put others before ourselves, right? And that's not selflessness. That's not necessarily care. It's ultimately self-sacrificing. And I want to name that because I'm so proud of how we've been talking lately about how much we need community. We need villages back. We need to be villagers again, things of that nature. And that does not necessarily require us to self-sacrifice, right? There are ways that we can show up in our selflessness, in our care for others without it being at the expense of ourselves. And true community is not in one direction. So you may experience some discomfort and some sacrifice, but there's someone there pouring right back into you as you pour into someone else, right? I saw a post that really broke down the concept of, you can't pour from an empty bucket, but the community way of thinking about it is that if you have something in your bucket, you share. And I was like, absolutely, because you have something in your bucket and someone else will then put something in your bucket. That's different from truly allowing the well to run dry and then expecting yourself to still pull from something and give and give and give. And so I think it's important to distinguish and position that this is not a call to forget about everybody else. In fact, I think that's a byproduct of these narratives we've had. It's like one or the other. You were either all sacrificing or you were completely selfish. And that's just inaccurate. It's also extremely possible for you to get to a space in your life where you matter, where you take care of yourself, where you are cared for, and you give to others. In fact, your giving will be so much richer because you will have had your needs met as well, right? So all of these things, the strong Black woman schema, a lot of the most praised parts of our culture, they're very toxic and they center and they ask us to overwork, overcommit, struggle, and suffer, right? And this was designed to uphold these toxic systems. They really do. All these systems benefit from our thankless labor. They benefit when we're too exhausted. They benefit when we give our all and we don't necessarily ask for or expect much in return. And they benefit when we are so drained that we don't have energy to dream, to resist, to advocate, to activate, to love. Like those are the things that are not only our birthrights, but are the paths toward systemic healing. And we don't really get to access that when we're exhausted and sick and overwhelmed. So if this piece of it feels really important for you to understand and work through, I really do want to recommend the book Rest is Resistance by the Nat Bishop, Tricia Hersey. Very, very powerful work that is centered in what so many Black feminist, womanist healers of our time and before our time have poured into so that we can know this. And again, I think it's important to remember that ultimately what we are working against is we internalize a lot of those things and they're not what they were cracked up to be. So if our culture praises overworking, overcommitting, and struggle and long suffering, and even the institutions we turn to for like help and support and relief, like spirituality, teaches us that our pain is not only expected, but it's normal and it's good and it's righteous. And of course, there's some acceptance that life will be hard. And honestly, there's some acceptance that life is probably a lot harder than it has to be because of what the nature of this world is. And we don't have to accept that long suffering is our default and that it earns us something. We don't have to. And I think the emphasis on unraveling it's a little less than just don't work or don't do things, which I'm totally fine with. If you're taking away from this that you need to work less, then shout out to you. Like, I see you. I want you to lean into that. I also think that unraveling encompasses so many aspects of how we unlearn these toxic ways of expending ourselves and disappearing ourselves, essentially, through vocation, labor, and roles in our life. So I really like the term unraveling because it encompasses rest. It brings in release, recovery, and true reset, right? Because we're purging what no longer works for us, and it helps us make space for what we need. So this might resonate with you that the strong Black woman schema is something that we were taught by the world around us. It's reinforced every day. It might be something that you saw your mom or the women in your family do, all of the overworking, serving the whole family, giving so much of herself, maybe even expecting you to do the same as a daughter in the family, that you were supposed to take on the torch of self-sacrificing, watching people in our community. I mean, even recently watching in the sport world, I work in athletics outside of my private practice, and I'm always paying attention to when some of our pro sport athletes like Naomi Osaka and, previously it was Taylor Townsend. And before that, it was Serena Williams. And I'm skipping over a bunch of names because this is so normalized that you're getting berated and disrespected. And your job is to respond politely, right? So even that, like learning how to take disrespect and harassment and bottle it up and make it palatable for other people how you respond. That is how we teach ourselves that we are not allowed to be and express ourselves in its truest form when there are other folks on this planet who can do that and they can show the emotion. They can get upset. They can also be disrespectful. They can be harmful and folks won't see it that way. And that's just got misogynoir written all over it. And that's not even considering those of us who are working multiple jobs or who are supporting so many people in the family, who are the strong friend in our group, the one that everyone turns to, but you're never asking for support. You're not really the one who is reaching out, right? So you're working through pain, you're dismissing and ignoring your own pain and needs. You're putting others before yourself. And you've basically learned that if you're not being completely selfless, which is not really selflessness, it's self-sacrificing. But if you're not being completely selfless, that you are completely selfish. And I think that's by design too, that anything other than existing at that extreme means you're existing at the other extreme. And this is so by design. It benefits everybody. I mean, think of everyone except us. Think on a micro level, when you're the strong friend or you're the overfunctioner in your relationships, so many people benefit from your emotional labor. But what do you get? You might get some comfort that you are still, quote unquote, in the relationship and you belong, but you may not be getting your needs met the way that others are. And then systemically, it's the same thing. The world benefits from our labor. They benefit from our thankless support and actions and not expecting much in return. And it even benefits when we can't dream, right? When we're not asking for more, when we're not expecting and dreaming up and innovating new ideas and new worlds and expectations, and we can't activate and advocate and demonstrate and literally protest for our safety. And even we don't even have the energy to love and to dance and to create art. Like these things get drained out of us all the same on the big stage and in our personal lives. And so I really want to emphasize that when we lean into things like unraveling, we are truly showing up for ourselves and we are healing a lineage that, as I said earlier, was taught that you can't do this, that this isn't for you, that this is not good, that your long suffering is actually what makes you righteous and what earns you a spot, right, in the good world or gets you the good things. When in reality, it just keeps you empty and drained. So I really want to lean into the term unraveling, and I really enjoy this concept because it's a little bigger than just rest, which is completely fine, but it truly underscores the idea that there's rest and then release and recovery and really resetting, like radically resetting, purging what no longer works for you and making space for what you need. So I hope this resonates with you, that maybe in these intentions that you're setting to allow yourself to be seen, it's a little less than figuring out how to communicate better or set boundaries or even posting more or speaking up more. All those things are wonderful. And what about the messier sides? Because as much as those things are vulnerable and can bring up anxiety and can make you really feel like you're pushing out of your comfort zone, there are ways that we really, really avoid because it feels like falling apart. It feels like coming undone. It feels like losing control in a way that doesn't feel safe, when in reality, that's the path to access a lot of the emotional work that we truly want, need, and deserve to have. And so unraveling helps us feel seen because when we rest, we care for ourselves. So literally on a physical level, we can actually combat chronic stress and illness and all that science stuff that we've learned about, we've been inundated with recently, connecting how intensely our stress impacts our health outcomes. And then on the emotional side, When you rest, you actually give yourself space to do the emotional rest, like to do the emotional work. We can't really do that if we don't have space to feel and live. Ultimately, we're numb, we're on autopilot, we don't have capacity to process our emotions. So all of this opens you up to having the energy you need to show up in your life. And that's not to say that our health outcomes are completely up to the fact that we stress too much, because again, so much of the stressors we're under are not our fault. And a lot of the other social determinants of health, all these other factors in our life that impair and impact our health are absolutely at play. And if there's power in our rest where we can take back some of this equation and impact our health in some way, why wouldn't we? Right? When you unravel, we actually process our emotions instead of carrying what's hurting us. We actually make room to develop the emotional capacity for what we desire, right? I always tell my clients, like, do you brush your teeth once and then you're like, huh, glad that's over? I hope you don't. I hope that brushing your teeth is a regular practice for you, right? It's really hard to get into a routine of consistent, sustainable, impactful, meaningful care if we're clogged up and if we never really do the work to unload and unburden ourselves of the emotions we're holding. And so unraveling is a big piece of how we do that. When we unravel, we also press the reset button. We actually get to release and make space. And I recognize it's so hard to start fresh. It's really, really hard to make room for something new, to move out of the habits you've always known, especially depending on how deeply connected your experiences are to past trauma or deeply rooted distressing events, because those are our survival mechanisms. So if we're working on getting out of some toxic fawning, some people pleasing things that maybe open the door to unsafe people, it's really, really challenging without releasing and resetting to build the capacity to shift that and start showing up in a boundary. And lastly, all of these parts of unraveling, they open us up to use our voice, to get our needs met, to unlearn toxic patterns, to feel safer in our bodies. This is the healing that we say we want, but we run from it, right? We keep expecting people to show up for us, but we never want to tell them how we're doing. We want to feel better, but we don't want to feel it all. And I'm preaching to the choir. We do show up in these ways that are really counterintuitive to what we say we need. And this is why unraveling can be so healing, because it tells us cut it out, right? Like, we don't have to pretend anymore. We don't have to wear the mask anymore. We don't have to keep showing up in these guardrails that are actually holding us back from what we need. And I want to name, we avoid it because it's hard and it's scary. And for anyone who's probably thinking about what this might be like for them and it's feeling intense, even for some of us who maybe have done this before, or we do this a little more regularly in this stage of our lives, as always, do this with a therapist, do this with a licensed mental health professional. Make room to have the support and the safety to do your healing work. And remember that the little things count too. Unraveling is not just deep, heavy grief. Sometimes it truly is saying, I am going to do absolutely nothing. I'm going to expect nothing of myself, and I'm going to trust myself in this moment to relax. That is unraveling, because that is a part of you that is saying, I don't have to show up in my defenses. I can just let it go. And sometimes our defense is doing, again, preaching to the choir. Sometimes one of our biggest defenses is doing, is working, is some form of labor and activity instead of being present with yourself. So even choosing to shift into that can be a form of unraveling. So let's talk about some specific things that we can do to help us with the art of unraveling. And I want to start with those little things, and they're not so little. They're like the little big things. They make huge impacts, and they walk us toward some of the more intense forms of unraveling and healing that might take some time to get to. This might feel like an obvious one. It also might feel like a big one, but actually letting yourself cry. I think tears are one of the most common things that we see as a sign of weakness. And I think that's so universal. I think maybe in some ways crying is more allowed, but I think there's so many of us, even those of us who literally like to help people cry for a living, we still maybe wouldn't go into certain spaces and just start crying, or we would see people crying and immediately start to assume certain things. And not just in a, I notice you may need something kind of way, but really it still just conveys a message of weakness, that something's just wrong and that maybe you need to stop crying. Like maybe my goal here is to help you stop crying. When in reality, I think, again, we were taught that displays of emotional expression and all of that is so terrible and it's so convenient that we don't even get to mourn and grieve in the way that our bodies ask us to. We kind of have to take a couple days and figure out how we're going to get back to work and all these different ways that, again, we've just learned toxic suppression. And so just letting yourself cry, even if it's just a tear, or even if it really is a deep, heavy cry, right? Even if it's a healthy crash out. I'm saying a healthy crash out. When I say crash out, I don't necessarily assume that it's going to end up in like prison or something. So I'm aware though that that's not necessarily the association, but what if we do need to yell? What if we do need to scream? What if we do need to break some things? What if we do need to shake, right? Those tantrums we threw when we were kids, although maybe we had to learn how to regulate that, the practice of like releasing emotion in that way, our body knew it needed something. Maybe we do need to throw some adult tantrums. Of course, we have some tools now to where we can show up in a way that is safe and productive for us. And how much of the art of truly just letting things out, how much of that has gotten lost in themes of that makes you weak or that makes you immature, when maybe there are ways that we can set aside time to just let it out. Another little big thing I would say is actually doing nothing. I said that a little earlier, but sometimes you have to even microdose that. So sometimes you say, I'm going to do that 5-minute meditation, or maybe you're going to just do 5 minutes where you're doing literally nothing, or you're doing only one thing. I actually often pause when I'm taking a break and I notice that the TV's on and I'm on my phone. And I'm like, okay, you're already overstimulated and you're kind of continuing to stimulate yourself. You're not going to feel rested. Put the phone down. Just, if you're going to watch TV, watch TV. Just watch the TV. And you probably would believe how much I will still pick up my phone unconsciously. I'll just grab it. I'll pick it up. I'll check the time and I'll check to see if I have any notifications. It's such a powerful habit that I'm really working on. And I think it means a lot when I'm reminding myself like, hey, I get to be present in one form of stimulation, or I get to be doing nothing right now, but maybe being entertained, and maybe even in extreme moments that TV's going off, the phone's going away. And then now I know it's time to do some breath work or take a walk or do literally anything that's going to actually offer me the space to hear myself think. With that being said, another little big thing is actually saying what you mean. Right. So there's so many ways we censor ourselves. We hold ourselves back to the point where sometimes we don't even actually know how we feel or what we think. And this is where a lot of processing, whether it's to yourself or your journal or even your therapist, that's where that can be really helpful, because it offers this like judgment-free, unrestricted space to be honest. And without that self-honesty, how do we bring that to our relationships? How do we bring that to our life? And sometimes actually getting away, releasing responsibilities, letting go, doing those things, it might feel like you're quote unquote running away. I know that's another association that comes with this thought of unraveling, which is that if you walk away from something, you're giving up, and that's bad. What if you truly need a break? What if we really need space? Or maybe we really do recognize something isn't for us anymore. Like, I love that we've as a culture, decided to motivate each other and encourage one another to see things through. And I think holding on too long to something out of fear that it means you're a quitter or you failed, that is just as harmful. And so just really being honest with yourself about what you need and where you need to be in order to give yourself the space to feel and heal. And those little things add up to the big little things, which is when we then grieve. That's when we heave. That's when we mourn, we lament, we really honor our pain. That's when we get into our body. We learn to feel instead of think. We learn to be instead of doing. That is where we repossess ourselves and really find room and space to connect with what we need. That is where we actually start to express ourselves, right? And we can let it out. And, again, maybe in the beginning, I'll let myself kind of cry a little bit and then I'll keep going. But this is where, if it is a scream, if it is a soliloquy, if it is a big speech to someone or to yourself, if it's an all night crying session, if it's just silence, right? Sometimes the way we actually process something is just by sitting with it and being with it, right? And then we have the space to let it out, share it, give it to someone, put it somewhere. We really follow whatever it's pulling us to do. Then we release. That's when we can really let go. We can give it away. We can detach from it. We can honor its home and we can honor your home. When you let something go, you're giving it back to or you're placing it where it belongs in this moment, and you're making space in your home, in your body, in your life for what actually needs to be there. How sacred is that? How loving is that to think of it that way? And then, like I've been saying, that's when you get to reset. You've made space and you get to use that lightness that you feel, that clarity that you feel. That's when you allow it to guide you. So as we close, I want to invite you to really pause and ask yourself, where am I holding my breath? Where do I need to unravel? Where do I need to let go? Where do I need to come undone? Where do I need to stop ascribing to a very unfair notion, a very unfair and historical expectation that I suppress and that I smile through everything? I want you to check in about that. Maybe start journaling it. And again, these are some tidbits to take into your intentions for the year. Maybe one of your goals is to start crying again. I've been through periods of years where I didn't cry much. Maybe some tears fell here and there, but didn't have like actual moments where I had release, and it was noticeable to someone like me because historically I was very emotional and very emotive and would cry regularly or cry easily. And then there were periods of time where that wasn't the case because of what was going on in life and the ways that it felt more important and safer to shut down. And so maybe even reconnecting with the ability to release through tears, maybe that's your goal for this year. Maybe your goal is planning regular moments where you do nothing. Maybe your goal is to stop planning altogether because you want to finally let go and actually just show up in your life and be present. So you will listen to your voice and you'll know what you need. But I want you to anchor yourself in these questions first to help you listen to what your body and your mind and your spirit is asking you for. All right, so if you liked this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and rate the podcast. And there's a link in the show notes for you to subscribe to the Scene Sunday newsletter, where I share a little more of my thoughts about the episode. And I'm always alerting you when the next episode drops. So be sure to share the love and come back to this episode when you need a reminder and a good hug. And to the Black girl who is allowing herself to finally unravel, I hope you find and become a soft place to land. Until next time, take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Black Girl Scene podcast. This podcast is meant for information purposes only and is not meant to substitute for medical advice. Although I'm a licensed therapist, this podcast does not establish a clinical relationship with you, the listener, nor does it replace a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. For more information and resources on finding a therapist or support, please visit www.blackgirlscene.com/support.